in this Humanverse, my body is getting older and I have passed my 30s and I begin to feel something that's called getting old or coming to age. And for me it's been positive. I never had a 30s crisis, although I've had various crises in my life. But the interesting thing that I've noticed is that I regard the youth now as quite in a good shape. They seem very polite and mature and very informed, and they have very easy access to information. When hitting an older age and you realize there's a difference, a gap between what you do in your everyday life and what other people do, the youth and so on. And I know it always seems like the youth is being destroyed. But if you don't look at the mainstream pop culture, ghetto kind of style, Kardashian, all that, I don't know, and you just look, sideways, you see lots of great stuff about youth. They learned so much before we actually did, and that's the most important thing in life, I guess, to leave the next generation with a better mind and in a better shape than we had. And one can always become sort of bitter and see problems for every solution and every development. But when you look at the whole picture, I mean, statistically our world has become more peaceful, and it's just amazing to see, to like overhear youth having a discussion or talking and interacting. And it doesn't have to be a great difference, but that makes me happy. And that makes me feel like, there's still hope. Nothing is doomed, actually. And especially in places where there have been lots of conflicts. Now, as of getting older, when you pass your 30s, you have maybe twice that left, or maybe twice and a half, or even twice that. I mean, 60 years to go if you live long. And it's a nice thing to live long and prosper. And in my state of mind, I feel really young, basically. Not young in the sense that I want to act like an 18-year-old, but really fresh. And it's always interesting to hear the stories about, for example, recently a Chinese man who had his ground poisoned by big companies. So he spent 16 years, I think, or 16 I think it was, to research law and become like an expert without any education. And he apparently won the first battle of that court procedure, I guess. And also when you meet like someone who's 70 years old, for example, in Spain, and the man tells you he began to making guitars when he was 60, that means he really began on something new at the late stage in his life. And when I think of my parents and people who have re-established themselves in a new country, getting job, learning the language, and making a life for themselves, I really have no respect for youth who don't make anything of their possibilities. For example, everyone has a crisis or a shitty stage in their life, or everybody gets down in the swamp of worries, sort of. But you have to be like a bull and really like fight through it. And life is long, so what happens during 1 year in 10 years seems like nothing. But at the same time, whatever you do in your everyday life shapes your year, basically. We can easily spend time criticizing and being ignorantly negative about things, but if we just hugged someone at the same amount, or just said to people, you like them, you love them, what you think about them, the world would be a different place. But we always seem to have it easier to complain rather than to be positive about things. So for me and my wife, we are still developing, we are still learning new things and re-educating ourselves, and being you have to dare to be a fool, like in the tarot card set. The first card in the major arcana is the Fool, and that seems like a negative thing, but that's a great thing, because if I want to learn to play the synthesizer now, for example, you have to start from scratch. You have to be naive, you have to ask, you have to go around and be curious. and you can learn everything like at any stage in life. Of course, there are some things you can't do. You can't become a professional sports player, and some things are maybe too advanced, but you can always get into any field. I mean, look at the archaeological discoveries. Most of them were made by enthusiasts who perhaps had money, or sold their idea to some rich people, aristocrats who gave them money to discover stuff. And so there's always a possibility, and there is really, like, I see no stagnation, and with the current society we have all the means to live a healthy life, just to be in shape. And when our body is in shape, our mind's in shape, and when our mind's in a good shape, the body's even in a better shape. So it's called, I call it like health ignorance of health. Like we have all the possibilities, but we perhaps don't act upon it. Or the ignorance of learning, like we consider things to take too long time and we don't know where to start. Well, the first step in starting something new is actually no step at all, because you don't know anything. And this is a very interesting time, because when you're 30 and 40, people seem to have sort of rooted in their roles, and that's a great thing. And you can always be rooted in a person or a character, even though you change career, or, for example, begin on a new education, start a new job, find a new partner, and so on. So there's always hope and possibility, and nothing needs to be in a state of stagnation. And that just amazes me, really. So it's a Friday night, and I was, of course, going out doing some grocery shopping, like I always do when I record this video, I guess. And there were so many young people, and I just became happy because they seemed nice. There were some couples, some smart kids, and so yeah. And I've seen this throughout where I've been and traveled. And of course, you can always complain about things like, for example, the influx of primitive culture to Sweden with young men coming in. But you have to realize that's the lowest of the lowest. In a normal state, in any decent society, it doesn't take much for the future to be positive, to be building upon the foundation of the older generation. And I think, I consider myself to be a part of that. I remember when I was young and getting all these sort of hints and visions of possibilities, how can you live an interesting family life, having children doesn't mean your life ends, or, all these sort of like insights into what easily could have been regarded as something, boring or negative, or, everyday life, Mondays. No, I saw people who weren't like that. And when I worked in the health store, organic food shop with stuff like that, there were all kinds of vibrant people coming in, and I ask them sometimes, what's your age? And I'm amazed. When I get old, I want to be like you. And I don't mean that they were sort of aspiring to be young, like some hunk at 18 years of age while the man was like 80. No, I mean, like, they had shiny eyes, were happy. And I don't mean like stupidly happy. Of course, when you're at that age, you have seen lots of things in your life. You have lost people and all that. But they still seem to sort of, like plunging through like existence, this Humanverse we live in. They just like, even if they just went out to buy like apples, they plunged through it. And that energy requires absolutely nothing than just letting go and be curious and be steadfast, like a river behind me, like just plow through life, and yeah, why do I want to say that? Because that's really true. When I was young and I saw these examples, and maybe I was a bit skeptic, but now I have the facts, or the facets in my hand, so I can see the actual result of that. And that's why I'm talking about this, and hoping to sort of like remind somebody, or just inspire people. And remember, like 1 year is a long time, 10 years is even longer. And as long as you set your mind on something, you can do it. So that's that. Take care, all the best, and have a great weekend in this Humanverse. Ciao.